All right, everybody. Time to learn a little bit about absolute value. Um, Absolute value is a new concept for some of you probably, but once you see what it is, you're going to discover it's not very complicated. So let's dive right into it and let's find out what absolute value is. Make sure you have your note sheet ready to go for this because there will be some things to fill in, and you will want to be able to fill them in so that you can look back on this later. Here we go. So absolute value is defined as the distance of a number, which is a word we want to fill in, from 0, I have it written here, but you could put it down as the number if you wanted, on the number line. So it's the distance of a number from 0 on the number line, how far away the number is from 0. We have a special way to write absolute value, and the way we would write, for example, the absolute value of -5 is this. So you'll notice that it's a -5 and it has two kind of tall bars around it, and that's how we write absolute value. What does this mean as far as a number line goes? Well, -5 is right here on the number line, and 0 is right here. And the distance that you would travel to get from -5 to 0 is 5. So we would say that the absolute value of -5 is 5. So let's move on to some examples then of where we might see these absolute value problems. So the directions are to evaluate the expression, as we've seen before. That means that we want to basically figure out the value of what's given to us. So here we have written down simply the absolute value of -3. Well, what that really means, remember, is basically we want to ask ourselves, how far is -3 from 0? So if you think about your number line, -3 is on the negative side, and it's 3 numbers away from 0. We have 1, then 2, then 3, or -1, -2, then -3. So the absolute value of -3 is 3, because it's 3 numbers away. In the second example, we have a similar idea going on. We have negative absolute value, -32,123. So you kind of want to treat absolute value as parentheses. So we want to take care of the absolute value first, and then we'll attach that negative that's on the outside again. So how far away would the number -32,123 be from 0? Well, it would be 32,123 spaces away. So the absolute value of -32,123 is 32,123. That's the absolute value. But we still have this negative that I'm circling right now to deal with. We haven't dealt with that negative yet. It's still on the outside. So what we're going to do is we're going to just attach that to the number we have, giving us a final answer of 32,123. Absolute values themselves will always end up being positive, but we can still end up with a negative answer if there's a negative outside of the absolute value. Let's move on to the next example. All right, so we're still evaluating expressions, but this time we have a number that we need to plug in for a variable. So we're going to have to use a little bit of substitution of numbers here. So in this first example, we're going to replace x with -3, as we're told in the instructions that x equals -3. So I'm going to rewrite this doing that. We have the absolute value of -3 minus 5 plus -3. Well, -3 minus 5 is -8, so we have the absolute value of -8 plus -3. For the absolute value of -8, we think, how far is -8 from 0? And the result we get is that negative 8 is 8 spaces away. So the absolute value of negative 8 is 8, and we're adding that to our negative 3 here. And 8 plus negative 3 gives us a result of 5. And that's the answer. Remember, evaluating is pretty much done when we can't go any further with the problem. And once we get that one number, we're done with that one. Brings us to our second example of this type. So again, first step we're going to do is take that x value of negative 3 in this case and plug it in for x. So we're going to have 2 times the absolute value of negative 3 plus 4 minus 5 times negative 3. So remember, we treat absolute value kind of like parentheses, so we want to deal with that first. Negative 3 plus 4 is 1. So we now have 2 times the absolute value of 1 minus 5 times negative 3. The absolute value of 1, how far away is 1 from 0? Well, it's 1 space away. So the absolute value of 1 is 1. So we have 2 times 1 minus, and we still have 5 times negative 3 here. Let's do our multiplications next. So we have 2 times 1, which is 2. And we have that minus 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. Well, remember that when we have minus negative 15, that's going to turn into plus. So we have 2 plus 15, which gives us 17 as our answer. And that example is complete. So there we have those two examples. To finish this up, we're going to look at 2 more complicated examples of absolute value problems. So no variables on this one, but we have a lot of math to work through. Again, we're treating the absolute value as if they were parentheses, so we're going to start in the absolute value bars. So here, we have 3 times, and in the absolute value bars, we have 4 times negative 3, which we can multiply, and we get negative 12. And then we still have divided by 9. Well, the absolute value of negative 12 is how far away from 0 negative 12 is, which is 12 spaces. So we have 3 times 12 over 9. And I know that a lot of you have gotten pretty comfortable using your calculators to evaluate these. So feel free to do that if you like. Your answer in the end, after you use your calculator correctly, should be 4. And last example. Here we have 2 absolute values. We're going to have to deal with that coming up. So let's again start with the absolute values because we're treating them kind of like parentheses. So over here we have the absolute value of 13 plus 12. 13 plus 12 is 25, so I'm going to change that right away. Plus, over here we have the absolute value of 24 times negative 2. 24 times negative 2 is negative 48 over 12. And then we have that times 3. All right, let's go through that a little bit. Can't really do anything to the 25 right now, quite yet. Plus, we know that if we calculate negative 48 divided by 12, we're going to get negative 4. And then we have times 3. Okay, so now let's deal with the absolute values. 25 is 25 spaces away from 0, so the absolute value of 25 is 25. And negative 4 is 4 spaces away from 0. So the absolute value of negative 4 is 4, and we know that we still have times 3 here. So according to order of operations, we need to do 4 times 3 next. So that's going to be 25 plus 12, because 4 times 3 is 12. And lastly, 25 plus 12 gives us our answer of 37. And that's that problem. So this is absolute value. Your homework for this lesson to get a little practice with the idea of absolute value can be found on the back of this note sheet. You should be solving all of the absolute value problems that you see on there. So good luck with the assignment.